On select Fridays at 12 p.m., docents from the Asheville Art Museum lead virtual, interactive conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Barbara Pressman will lead us in an interactive conversation about 3 artworks in our collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each artwork. Barbara will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation about each with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Barbara, myself, and each other throughout the hour. Barbara, what will you be talking about today?
I'm going to be talking about some portraits, and through the history of art, there's always been portraits, starting back in the Renaissance, Giotto, all the way to Andy Warhol and everything in between. And sometimes they were for religious purposes, sometimes it was rock stars, sometimes it was rich people trying to remember their ancestors. So today we're going to think about the different reasons why people create portraits and what the artist reveals about the subject and himself when he does it. And portraits can be done in many media. Some of them are done in clay, some of them in chalk, pastels, watercolors. And today we're going to be looking at 3 different media and 3 very different artists. So can we start with the first slide? Okay, we're going to look, excuse me. We're going to be looking at it slowly. I'm going to give you a few minutes to look at this artwork. What's going on in this artwork?
Have you opened it up for discussion?
Yes, Sharon. Yeah.
Well, I think it's so interesting. It's certainly, if I'm not wrong, she is painted on a board, and then the pottery is real. Yes, it's not a painting portion there, but wow. And I guess what I was seeing, I was kind of looking at her very carefully, and I think she has a child tucked into her outfit. Do I see a little face at her neckline?
You know, I never saw that, but I don't know if we, Sharon, I don't know, can we enlarge the photo to see if there is a child?
I have to get other people's opinions maybe here.
Yeah. Anybody else see
Yes.
a child tucked into her?
Mm-hmm.
I think. Oh well, let's see. Is it? I've seen this artwork several times. I've never noticed it. I'll have to look at it more carefully. I have it really minimized on my screen so I can see all of you. But Sharon noticed that they were different media and there were some real objects, and that the portrait was on what did you say? A piece of wood, on a piece of wood.
Yeah, it looks that way.
Can we find more?
And who is the artist, Barbara?
Oh, we get to that later on.
Oh, okay. I was
First,
wondering.
we're going to discuss the artwork and see
Okay.
what you see. And
Okay. Oh, what I see is possibly a Native American woman, and that would go along with Doris's not Doris, I'm sorry, Sharon's observation of perhaps holding the baby close to her breast. The identity of the portrait possibly being a Native American woman.
holding a child. So you think
Holding her
so there
child.
are several people who think that this person might be Native American and she's holding something close to her. And what do you see that makes you say she's holding a child?
I'm having trouble seeing it. It's not large enough for me to really see what everybody else is seeing. Is there a way of enlarging it, or?
I don't know.
I don't
I
have, I don't
Yeah,
have the
you don't
ability
think-
to zoom in.
Okay. Well,
This is a large piece,
Okay,
but
no
it is a
problem.
large piece. Well, maybe she is holding a child. Maybe it is a Native American and she's holding her a child. And what is the first thing that caught your eye about this artwork?
I noticed the pottery all falling, the cups and the bowls and the saucers, and I almost, in a sense, took them to be as tears, representative of falling, of tears coming down from her eyes in an unusual way. And I did not initially see the child or baby, but when I stare closer, I do see right below her chin some what could be dark hair, and right above her hand there could be a face. So it does sort of look like that. She looks young and also Native American. And I think the mediums of the pottery and the wood and the shading make it unusual and nice.
So you think the mixed media enhances the artwork? Okay. Do you think that this is a posed portrait? Do you think that the subject posed for the portrait?
It looked posed to me, and it also, I felt that if she were indeed Native American, which she seems to be, the way that she's dressed is really not typical Native American garb, you know, with that dress and the little rose at her chest there, and the way her hair is fixed. And with the china, it seemed to me that she was perhaps transported through some means, either through marriage or something, into a more, I guess, traditional culture, you know, white person culture. And so she's got all of this traditional china, which I would assume if she were serving people in a, you know, in a Native American enclave, it would be more, you know, simple pottery. So that was just what I got. I got her transitioning perhaps into another cultural realm.
Okay, so from what you're saying, Angie, you feel that the pottery or the earthenware, whatever it is not indicative of her personality. It's something transitional, or yeah, that it's changed something. And Ellen also mentioned she was sad, and I think someone else, Laura, also mentioned something about the pottery being tears, that it looks sad. Have you know that? Anybody else have any ideas about her expression or how she feels?
I think it looks like Sacagawea, and working with Lewis and Clark, carrying her papoose across the country and serving them tea when they camp.
Oh, that is a really good story. I like it. Traveling across the country and serving tea to Lewis and Clark. Interesting. Good. Thank you. Interesting observation. Does anybody else? But I think both Angie and Ian have said something about serving, using the pottery for some kind of serving. Yes, Hillary? Hillary, did you want to say something?
Oh, I didn't realize. Yeah, I continue to hear people calling it ceramics or pottery. Those are dishes. There's nothing fancier about it. Those are real dishes that all of us who ever played a more traditional domestic role would recognize easily. And I think anyone who would recognize those as dishes. So I see it as a social comment, especially the fact that the dishes are falling down, those dishes that are those saucers or whatever they are that are falling down. I don't know. For me, it's reminiscent of making a comment on woman's role and letting go of the dishes, and I don't know. That's the way I saw it.
Well, that's interesting. We had someone who said that the dishes were like tears falling from her
Uh-huh.
eyes, and you are seeing that the dishes reflect the role of a woman and that they're also falling down, or
Mhm.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Just letting go of them at last, or I don't know. I mean,
She's letting go of it.
I did not see her as Native American, and since everybody on this convo is a white person, it's a shame that we don't have someone of color to make a more a keener observation about us so many of us recognizing or seeing that as Native American.
Okay,
I have something to say.
sure, go right ahead.
I'm not convinced she's Native US American. To me, she could also be Latin American.
Exactly.
And I can't tell if she's indigenous Latin American or mestizo Latin American. And one thing I thought was really interesting is if she is US Native American, I don't think she would have those dishes. It would be unusual, I think, but that I don't know because I don't live there.
Oh, well, okay, well, yeah, so
I
you
can't tell how old it is. If it was from the last century, it looks like it's more modern. Like I said, I can't see well.
Does anyone
If
else have
it
something
weren't from the last century, I doubt for sure. It would be really unusual to have those dishes.
Okay, well, I think that's interesting about the dishes, but because you brought up time, and I think that was one of my questions. Do you think there's anything about this artwork that indicates the time frame that it's from?
My response when I first saw it was not Native American necessarily, but some colonial place. It could be an island, it could be Tahiti, it could be any number of islands that Europeans were colonizing. So that's how I saw it at first glance.
And what did you see that made you say that, Anne?
To me, she didn't look that Native American. She looked more Polynesian or something like that. So I saw her, and the china looked very well. In America, we had a lot of British looking china. It looked kind of British, simple, but pretty little floral plates from Europe someplace, but probably English. But that was my first response.
I agree. I think she looks Polynesian, somewhere in that area. It reminds me of the people in Gauguin's paintings.
Oh, okay, that's
I
interesting.
agree. That was what I visualized too.
And I don't see her garb as being old-fashioned. It looks more modern.
Could she be selling the dishes if she's from an island?
I think
okay, go ahead.
When I was looking at the dress that she has on, and I'm able on my screen to kind of, with two fingers, make it a little bigger. And it's a very big rose or some flower pattern on the front, which again, I think that's going towards the way the comments are coming in now, that it is a person that's not our Native American type dress, maybe Central America, even Incas or people of a different culture. But I think the artist is really telling us something. There's a social comment here. I can't quite put my finger on, but the dishes are older, they're broken, they're dirty. as you go down, as they are falling. They're getting less and less pretty. And I just think, I don't know what the social comment is, but certainly we're all aware of the treatment of people of other cultures. Maybe she's been forced to use like this colonization dishes, the colonizers' dishes, and now they're falling away or something. I'm anxious to hear what the artist might have had in mind.
Could I comment on her garb?
Yes, sure. But can I just bring up, Megan had written in the chat that her dress looked very ornate, and she also talked about the flowers on the plates. And I don't know whether she wants to say anything about it, but she had written that in the chat. And then all right, Barbara, if you want to say, I don't know.
Oh, okay. It really looks very modern to me, like European modern. Because again, I can't see, and I was going to bring it up on my phone, but just so I could do that thing where you open it up, because I'm looking at it on the computer. But I actually lived in Central America for 5 years, so I didn't live in South America, so I'm not at all familiar with native dress other than what I've seen in photographs. But so it doesn't look like the traditional Guatemalan dress or Salvadoran or Nicaraguan. That's what I'm most familiar with. And Mexican looks very Guatemalan. It to me looks like she could have gotten I can't see. Almost looks like she could have just gone to a store and gotten that dress, but again, I can't see. But the flower on it looks like it's supposed to be real.
Okay, so
that makes me think of Polynesian.
And you think it's a more modern thing, and but several people have talked about the dishes, and so I would like to think about it. Sharon brought up that perhaps there was a commentary by the artist. What do you think that the choice of medium, the varied choice of medium that the artist used, has to say about this portrait? Does anybody else have the same feeling as Sharon that it might be a social commentary?
I think it's a social commentary.
You do, okay.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree with Sharon.
Okay.
Especially
Any ideas? Let's have some ideas of what the props add to this narrative. What do the dishes, if it was the picture without the dishes, what do the dishes add to the narrative? We had a couple of suggestions that it was, tears, that it was woman, role of women. Anybody else have any ideas what the dishes might represent?
I wonder, because the woman in Ian Baird's Zoom mentioned the area of Polynesia. I thought I don't know who colonized that area. Was it the British? Because of
French.
or
That was probably the French, but there's lots of islands.
Yeah, I'm sure. Isn't it everywhere? So maybe the dishes have to do with the colonizers.
Okay, so we had all different ideas about where she came from and who she is. Can we see the information slide? Okay. And I'll tell you a little bit about, it is a very large piece and it's really impressive. And it's one of my favorites. I just always like to incorporate it in any tour I can do because I think it's so striking. Some people have talked about the wood, and this is by Whitfield Lovell, who was born in 1959, so he's 61 years old. He's an African American, and he takes these portraits that he finds of anonymous people from the Civil War up until the Civil Rights movement, and they are African American. So it's not indigenous and it's not Polynesian.
African
These
American.
are
Wow.
African American, and
Wow.
there is a social commentary there, because he puts them on. Usually the boards are from the houses. He's one of those found objects. So he scours buildings and uses boards from the insides of the walls, and uses something called Conti crayons, I think, or I've heard of Conti crayons, oil crayons, or charcoal to replicate the photographs. And then he adds found objects, and they're called installations, and he's done quite a few of them. And he says he pairs objects with found object evoking personal memories, ancestral connections, and the collective American past. And he's still at work. He went to Cooper Union and Maryland Institute of Art. So after hearing that, any ideas?
I had an idea. Because to me, I wouldn't have recognized it as someone African American. And there was, I wonder if this particular person was of mixed race or whatever you want to call it, because there were a lot of African Americans who associated with Native Americans. So there's a new look when people of those two groups get together.
Okay, that's true. There are a lot of African Americans who are mixed race.
And I think especially in the South. Well, I mean, obviously.
I think of New Orleans then, now that I know, and I think of all the different people from all the different countries that went there, and there were Creole people. Not that she couldn't be African American. She's obviously wearing sort of a European style. I mean, to me, it also looks like a kimono or something, but that may be because I can't really tell. And her hair has been done up in more of a European or Western style. So I think it's probably just the heavy ness of having to live in a culture that doesn't see you as anything but someone to help out at home. I mean, you know, something like that, and wear their culture.
Well, some very interesting ideas. I really enjoyed your comment.
Does he make his photographs available so we can see what the original person looked like?
I really don't know, but you can look him up on the internet, and there were quite a few of his artworks. I don't know if they were the original photos, but they're quite interesting, and his choice of objects is quite interesting. And I think when he chooses an object, he's trying to tell us something. And for me, I always felt that he was talking about the domestic, also the rise of women, or the role of a domestic in the home. And I just like this piece. I think it's really beautiful. And if you get to the museum, you really have to go see it. It's lovely. And as always, I learned something. I never saw the baby, and I never ever thought of her from being from Polynesia. But so you learn something new every time we have a discussion. So let's see our next artwork. Give you a few minutes to take a look at it.
Wow.
Monroe.
Do you think so?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
It's a movie set.
I hear comments before. Okay,
It could be, to me, it's a movie set.
And I think it's Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, and what do you see that makes you say that?
Well, it looks like her. And
Yeah.
her last movie, or one of her last movies was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was it was shot in the West. It was had that sort of feel to it, that black and white feel to it. And I think this is a photo from the movie set.
Wasn't John Wayne in that movie?
No, he
No,
wasn't.
somebody else.
Wow. It is a movie set. And what do you see that makes you know that it's a movie set? Besides seeing Marilyn Monroe, who's highly
light.
identifiable.
Well, you have the drop mic on the side there that would be used for recording on set. Yeah.
Right. Okay, and you were correct, it's from her last movie. And
Wow.
what is your knowledge of Marilyn? How does that affect your perception of this artwork?
I was really moved by this because I think it really expresses what she was to herself and really to the world, which was just an image. You know, she was reduced to the beauty, and you know, despite the fact that she had a number of men, you know, famous men like Arthur Miller and Joe DiMaggio and John F. Kennedy, so on, all attracted to her, these men were recognized for things that they accomplished, like literature, like legislation, like athletic prowess. But all she had really to offer, and I think all that she saw in herself, was her image. So to me, this isolation, and the only other man-made object is this boom or whatever the heck it is behind her. I think it indicated the smallness, I believe, that she felt in herself, her isolation, and the way that she ultimately ended up dying alone and, you know, pretty much unloved by herself and possibly by others. So it really moved me.
Yeah, me too. I always sort of picture, when I picture Marilyn Monroe in a role like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or something where she's really sexy and glamorous. And here, you know, her clothes are sort of casual, and she looks so pensive, like she's so deep in thought. And you typically, from the characters that she played, especially early on in her career, she was sort of an airhead in a way. You know, this is so different from the image that I have of her.
So I cheated and I looked up the movie, and it was her last movie. It was called The Misfits.
Oh, yeah,
it was
that's famous.
It was written by Arthur Miller, who of course we know had a relationship with her, and it was directed by John Huston and co-starred Clark Gable.
Oh my God.
And actually, it was both of their last movies. Clark Gable was in the movie, and so was she. And it was panned originally, did not get good reviews, but over the years, because of their important roles as movie icons, it's now listed as one of the most important films of the 60s, which I think is interesting. Thank you. And I was going to tell you that later on, but since it came up, I figured I'd let you know. And Angie and Doris, I really like the way you talked about her isolation and this showing her in a different image than the Marilyn that we usually think of as sex symbol. And I think Angie, Doris said that her clothing. Someone made a comment in the chat.
Oh, I don't know, when I see this picture, it kind of makes me sad. I think maybe one of the reasons is that we know so much about her life and how she was this famous movie star and apparently had fame and money and glamour and all this kind of thing, but in the end actually was so unhappy that she did away with herself. She came from a semi-normal family. She wasn't a blonde. First of all, hey. Anyway, but the expression on her face, I don't know what that, you know, means to other people. I'd look at it, is she trying to remember her lines or think about other things in her life, how her life is going at this part? She looks very young. So, and we know her unfortunate end. So I don't know. And I guess it's the plainness of the scene behind her as well, kind of an empty scene of, I don't know if that's is that water or no, it must be sand that she's got kind of a desolate landscape. I don't know if it's trying to convey a meaning, then I would say it's kind of like, what is my life all about here?
I would say the black and white
And
makes
what
it
is she
very
holding?
powerful. You know, just
Yeah.
the black and white there is very dramatic. And the
Yeah.
fact that it's a profile, she's in the middle of the picture, but yet we don't see her face on, we only see her as a profile. But I'm noticing the shadowing along the microphone device. So it appears that this is the desert and it would be hot, yet she's dressed as if the weather is chilly and not very hot. Plus, I almost kind of see a little bit of motion. I don't know if it's like a little bit of wind because of her hair the way it is. So it is a very dramatic photo.
I sort of
Yeah.
remember the movie, and it seems to me that the movie was out of character for both of the characters. I mean, he was never a cowboy in any of his movies. He always was very dapper, and she was always very glamorous. And I think this movie showed them in both in a totally different light. It was rough and tumble. She didn't wear fancy clothes. She wore rough clothes. Her hair was windswept. They were misfits. So I think the public maybe wasn't quite ready to see either one of them in that role, and especially Marilyn, perhaps.
Well, in the chat, Ellen noted that she died a year and a half after that, and she felt that the clouds looked like a foreshadowing of her death. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that she looks like she wants to be unseen. She wants to be hidden. She's very turned inward, and it's like to be as visible as she was. And it's on a movie set, of course, you're incredibly visible. Yet she seems really turned in this to me, and very vulnerable, very, very like very exposed and not wanting to be. That's what I read into it.
Yes, I think Angie also mentioned that she looked very isolated, and someone else said, agreeing with you, Michael, that was in the chat, that said that the sweeping landscape, and she looked so small and turned.
A tremendously desolate landscape to me.
So I guess we pretty much covered what the mood of this is, but I want to ask you, do you think this was a posed photograph?
I like to think it wasn't. I mean, I think, you know, the pensiveness of her, I would really like to think that it was just taken candidly. And I think, you know, what Michael was saying about how this is out of character for her. Well, a movie written by Arthur Miller was completely out of anything in her past. You know, she's the one that we remember with the skirt blowing up in the wind, you know, from the sewer grate. And I think that, you know, it was an attempt by Miller to bring her up a little bit. And I would imagine that she was extremely out of her depth. So that's why I believe it's a candid shot showing her inadequacy and isolation again.
Does anyone have any idea where she might be looking? Where is she looking?
She's looking down.
Megan, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I was struck by the composition of the photograph, because a movie set would have, you know, costumers and makeup artists, and I mean, there'd probably be 50 to 100 people, you know, working on the set. And you'd see a lot more than just that one, I guess, is that called a boom? You know, the microphone, there'd be lights and, I mean, just all sorts of things, vehicles, catering trucks, you know, trailers. So I wonder if the photographer sort of wasn't just snapping photos of the set, but sort of had had a point of view when this photograph was taken.
So you think that the photographer was selected in the composition of this particular photo, and that the photographer was trying to reveal something about Marilyn by leaving out the rest of the busyness that would be associated with a movie set?
Yes.
Anybody
And
else?
I think it says to me that just what Megan was saying made me think, oh yeah, there's probably hundreds of people and equipment and stuff all around her, really close to her, that's just not captured here. And what that says to me is that despite all of the activity and all of the people around her, you can still be lonely and isolated.
Eleanor says, I have a sense of empathy. Let me read the whole chat. I have a sense of empathy for her, which the photographer is evoking. Yes, and what do you see that makes you say that, Eleanor? Could you unmute yourself? You have something to say.
Yeah, the contrast, her face looking down, her hands sort of covering her, protecting her, or keeping her inward. I mean, just her arms being in, so her whole posture is inward, and just knowing her history and the press and all the pressure on her, that she didn't, just that sense of that she never got a chance to be who she was, or and the famous men around her, and it just the posture and her history.
Okay, what if this wasn't Marilyn? Maybe what if it was some other woman standing in the middle of this? We know that she's so visible and so identifiable, but if there was another woman standing on this isolated area, what would you think about that? Would that change your thoughts about this perception?
Well, she'd still be, what we would consider a beautiful woman, that, the blonde. And also, as I look at it more, I almost feel like this is not an actual location shot. It looks almost like it's a setting. Look at the sky, look at those mountains. It looks like it's almost a painted studio backdrop behind her. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that sense of, again, a sense of unreality that she's, she's making believe.
I think she's just caught by the photographer as she is preparing for a scene, and she's thinking about what she's doing, and then I think all the equipment and all the people are in front of her, whatever you want to call it, getting ready for that scene, and he just caught her before she had to perform. But that's the way I see it. And she does look vulnerable, and we all know that she was very insecure. But then she would rally and, be the person that everybody wanted.
Is she holding binoculars? Is that, I don't know if there's a way to zoom in on her hands, but it almost looks like she might be holding binoculars.
Yeah. I was wondering, when I first looked at, I'm not tremendously familiar with Marilyn Monroe, but I thought I always recognized her. But to me, it doesn't look like Marilyn Monroe, and she's definitely not wearing her signature clothes that would make her look like I remember her being Marilyn Monroe. So I think it's really interesting.
1950s.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. She's not wearing one of those sexy dresses, and what she's wearing is, I don't know if that's what she wore in the Misfits, but I was wondering, is this supposed to be a actual scene from the movie? How is it related to the Misfits?
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. I just wanted to, Megan said the movie was filmed in Nevada. Yeah, I think the theme of the movie is about a woman going for a quickie divorce in Reno. That was very popular back in when it was harder to get divorces. But I was wondering what the choice of the black and white film and that medium of, you're talking about, Angie was talking about maybe it being a painted setting. Now, if it was a painting or if it wasn't a black and white photo, would it feel different to you?
Was it in black and white?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the film was in black and white, which is sort of interesting. It was made in 1961. And if you think about John Huston films, he always, the Treasure of Sierra Nevada, that comes to mind. What else? Sierra Madre. And yeah, that's a brewery or something. Anyway, his sets are usually very austere, and it usually zooms in on people and their emotions and things like that. I mean, I think of even the, any of his movies.
Okay.
He's not, you're not usually
going
going.
Artwork, and I do want to tell you a little bit more about the artist, because John Huston did not take this picture, which is austere. Can we have the information slide? Okay, this was filmed taken during the filming of The Misfits in Nevada by Eve Arnold, who was born in Philadelphia in 1912 from Russian immigrant parents. And she began photographing in 1946. And she was very well acclaimed. She worked for this large company called Magnum Film Agency, but she also studied at the New School in New York City and spent some time in China. In 1980, she had an art show at the Brooklyn Museum. So, and Eve Arnold and Marilyn met at a party, and Marilyn said, "Oh, I saw the portrait you did of Marlene Dietrich, and you did such a great job. I'd like you to photograph me." And she did 6 shoots with Marilyn over her lifetime. One of them being 2 hours, and this one for 2 months. She was on the set. Eve Arnold was on the set of the movie and took these photographs. So I think that's really interesting. And I love this quote from Eve Arnold. If a photographer cares about the people before the lens and is compassionate, much is given. It is the photographer, not the camera, that is the instrument. I really like that.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yes, it is. And I think she did a fabulous job of capturing Marilyn. And it did foreshadow her sad death.
And it's easy not to recognize her because she's, I just think of her, when I think of her, I just think of looking at her from the front. I don't think of looking at her from the side. So it would, for me, it would be harder to recognize her from this position.
Okay, can we see the next slide? Thank you all. Interesting insights.
Mm.
Give you a few minutes to look at it.
Hank Williams.
Okay, since we're not
Peaceful. I think that's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think it's the peaceful sound, something.
Let's take time to think of heaven.
Oh, okay. I made it larger so I can read it for you.
Oh, good.
It's Hank Williams, The Peaceful Sound in Music by Howard Finster from God, Man of Visions. I think it's the date. I think it's, his number. He numbered his artwork. So I think it's
June 26.
Yeah, works June, 26, 10:40 p.m. Take time to think on heaven. It is the best thing that could happen to you. Talk to Jesus and get ready to go to heaven. Have that holy feeling that you escaped hell and pain.
Mm.
I know that it's very hard it's very distracting, the words, but what do you see about the artwork? What do you see in the artwork? What stands out to you? Or caught
Well,
your
I
eye
think it's
first,
I
besides
think
the
it's
words?
in that genre called outsider art, and or naivety, or whatever you want to call it. Someone who liked him and is creating this work of art because of that. I mean, he can't spell peaceful, so I'm guessing he's assuming it was a man, could have been a woman. There are a lot of sort of, they may call them other things like, I don't know, but sometimes they call them outsider art. They're not trained artists necessarily, but responding, and rather sometimes really marvelously.
Okay.
And this one's very interesting.
And what's interesting about it?
I think the shirt is very interesting. I don't know if the two buildings are churches. Certainly with the words that he's talking about, it might, be a church because of religious feeling here. But when I look at the upside down V's in the shirt, so not the collar, but the shirt base, there's faces in there. So we have all these, and I don't know if you would say they're kind of ghoulish faces or odd things in his paintings there. Is that maybe the devil coming after us? We've got to be careful. I don't know. So it's a very, and I guess the rest of the shirt just looks like cactus or plants, very simplified plants. And certainly the face is so primitive, I guess, in its drawing, but interesting.
Okay, so
I think the colors are really the reds, the purples, the blues. And to me, it looks like Little Women. I don't know, there's blue and green, like they're decorating a tree or putting something on something. Right, they're all throughout there. And he doesn't really have any arms. I mean, we don't see any more of his body. And then the words at the bottom are interesting for the misspellings of peaceful and escaped, and the fact that the picture has a date and a time very specific. But I was also drawn to his eyes. I mean, the eyes there are very, right, they really draw you in to a certain extent.
where do you think he's looking? What do you think he sees?
It looks to me like he's almost trying to give us a message, because it looks like it's he himself as a man was torn between, he had strong religious beliefs. He wrote songs that were religious, as well as worldly. So, and he died very young. He kind of burned himself out with, alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. And I think he wasn't even 30 when he died, if I'm not mistaken.
30. Oh yeah, less than 30.
Yeah.
29.
Yeah, so it looks to me like he's showing that this man had this spirit, this potential to, give us some spiritual healing, but he was so torn between, the two worlds, the spiritual and the worldly. That's what I got out of it.
I think that's what Sharon kind of noticed on his shirt, that there were those pretty colors and then those dark ghoulish faces. So there was some kind of a contrast that Angie has also talked about. Do you think?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Deaf faces.
Was it Michael who wanted to
Yeah,
say-
I just wanted to say I'm very familiar with his music. My son just recorded a cover album of his songs, and there's so much about it that was really brilliant songwriting, like "You're Cheating Hard" or "Cold, Cold Heart," and yet most of the songs were about pain and suffering and loss and despair. And this portrayal of his eyes looks to me, very young and also otherworldly. Like this was not Hank Williams as he lived, but maybe it's a visionary or idealized version of what he was trying to do or trying to accomplish. And that very last sentence, you get ready to go to heaven, and you have that holy feeling that you escaped hell and pain. And that's, I think this is what, died at 29, drunk in the back of a Cadillac. And, he had a painful, difficult life, even though he was a brilliant artist and very accomplished and highly recognized even in his lifetime. His son, Hank Williams Jr., lived down the street from where I grew up. So I was very aware of him also, but a very tortured man also, I would say. But I think this is an interesting, I sort of idealized version of Hank's best spiritual side, you could say. The loving, it looks very loving to me and very open and very vulnerable, very, very vulnerable.
Well, some
That's
people
what the
have-
lack of arms and hands maybe also says. There's no agency here. Anyway, just a few thoughts.
A lot of thoughts.
Very good thoughts. And Eleanor also talked about his expression being so calm. And did you want to say anything else about it, Eleanor?
There's just one other thing.
No.
That,
oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, just thinking about that despite how people live or how painful his life may have been for so many folks, that solace they get from having a more traditional faith.
Can you say that last thing again? Having a traditional faith?
Faith, religious
sorry.
faith. You know, that it may not be in the forefront of how they live or the choices they make, but for many people I know, sensing you have a relationship with Jesus and you have that tradition provides some solace, particularly at the times where you may be facing the end of your life or potentially living in a way that may shorten your life.
So I was looking at the shape of the artwork, and I got seeing a tombstone.
Oh, wow.
With the information down at the bottom. The head sort of is unusual, but if you just look at the colored part, it's like a traditional tombstone, and then the head elaborates it. So he did die young, and I think this person really admired him and thought he was wonderful, and probably is lamenting his early death.
To me, it was, I looked him up and he was born in Mount Olive, Alabama, and died in Oak Hill, West Virginia. So,
what do you think about the choice of media? The choice of color.
I love the color.
Someone mentioned a tombstone, so I was wondering the choice of colors for a tombstone. Any comments on it?
Is this a watercolor painting or is it a collage? The hat almost looks like it could be pasted down pieces of paper. I'm not sure what the medium is here.
Well, all right, let's go to the information slide.
Oh.
Howard Finster.
Yeah, and it's acrylic and markers on plywood.
Oh.
So I guess that the shape is the shape that you see, and it's in color.
Do you have the back of the artwork?
Oh, wow.
So he continued to write,
Yeah.
a
Well,
working since 1976, Howard Finster, June 26, 1990. God bless, 10:40 p.m. And I think he even has a price there, $150, it looks like, and he has some other little figures there, which is kind of.
We'll buy it.
And
I'm sure it's not that cost.
Right.
Because, you know, we have a couple of pieces by Howard Finster at the Asheville Art Museum, and he is an outsider artist, as Anne noted. And he was born in December 2nd, and he came from a family of 14, and he spent the better part of his life as a preacher, but he did work many other jobs. He even worked as a bicycle repairman, I read, and he did he laid bricks. He was a plumber. He was a radio show host. And actually, he was a larger than life character. He was on Johnny Carson, and I think he played a banjo, and they said he wore a powder blue suit, and he played a banjo. And so he was very famous, Howard Finster, in his time. And he was inspired to do art. He supposedly put his finger in some paint, and I don't know whether he saw the face of God or Jesus, but he felt that he was a visionary and he was very religious. Hank Williams said that folk songs express the dreams, prayers, and hopes of the working people. But from a lot of what I read, he wasn't very religious. And his mom was very religious and tried to get him to go to church, and she had difficulty getting him to go. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think he also struggled because he had spina bifida, and he lived in a great deal of pain all of his life. And there was some speculation at his death that it might have been painkillers and alcohol that might have affected him. But I do think that Michael was correct, and many of you were correct, that the artist surely loved Hank Williams and loved his music, and he portrayed his best self. And I was just going to say, we had two famous people portrayed and one anonymous person portrayed. And my question or my theme was, what do portraits reveal? Do they reveal more about the artist or more about the subject or more about the artist's perception of the subject? I thought that was an interesting thing to think about. We have like 2 minutes if anyone has any comment on that.
I have an outside comment, not exactly on that.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Well, when you were talking about Hank being who he was and Howard revering him so much, just reminded me of, I've been looking at this particular musician lately, and she was the host of a special event for songwriters. I forget the exact year. It might have been 2011, maybe a little bit later. And her name is Julie Gold. And she happens to be Jewish. And if you're familiar with Judaism, supposedly the Jewish people are the chosen people. There's a whole thing about that. But what she said, as she this is the event, she's the MC of it, and she herself has written incredible songs. So she said for her, the chosen people are the songwriters. And she sang her first song that she ever wrote when she was 30. So she's around in her 50s, close to 60 maybe, when she is at this event. And she wrote her first song when she was 30, and she was working for, I forget, some company, sorry, having to do a show business, but I forget what it is. And her
Thank you,
famous
Barbara.
song
I
is
think that-
From a
I-
Distance, From a Distance, which was put into the congressional record when I think one of the Afghan war, the Iraq war happened.
Well,
One
I
of
think the
those.
idea of the songwriters being chosen people, I think Howard Finster would certainly agree with that. Hank Williams was chosen by creating the songs that he wrote. I want
Yeah.
to thank you all.
One,
for your-
one other,
What?
oh, one other thing about Mr. Finster was he was a Baptist minister from Georgia. And
Wow.
he felt that God had chosen him in his artwork, inspire others to religion.
Wow.
So that's kind of interesting. And I guess that's what he's exactly doing here in his artwork.
Yeah.
Yes, and he was they said he was a larger than life personality, and he was even in an
Mhm.
REM music video. So he was very influential. And so
What?
I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed my artwork.
We sure did. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Barbara, and everyone who joined us today. Join us next time on October 22nd when Hank Bovey will lead us in a conversation with the theme Rural Avant-Garde, the Mountain Lake Experience. So thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon and a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.